The fallacy of prophylactic protection. Physical examination of prostitutes does not protect cultured men from character contamination. Everything that a man has acquired during his whole past history is recorded in the pattern of his bloodstream and body cells. These cells are electrically contaminated by inharmonious waveforms of the sexed electric current. The effect upon his character is inescapable. This is as true of a whole nation or race as it is of one man or woman. Superiority or inferiority. Much is said regarding the equality or inequality of mankind. Equality lies only in man's inheritance from God of all he has to give. Each one of us is an equal extension of God, spiritually, mentally, and physically. Our mind is his mind, and our body is also his. Each one of us inherits all of God's knowledge, love, and power, but some are aware of it and use it more than others. Inequality is an outstanding characteristic of all creating things in nature. There is a superiority or inferiority in units of every type and species, an apple, a rose, or a man. Also, there is no exact duplication of pattern in any two units in nature. Not even two blades of grass are alike, nor two leaves on a tree. Likewise, no two people are alike in pattern, either in whole or in part. Of all the millions of people, each with 10 fingers, no two fingerprints in all of the countless millions are exact duplicates. Everything in this whole universe is part of everything else, all being one, but each part of that one whole is either superior or inferior to other parts. Consider the fingers of a man's hand. They all belong to the one man, and all have all he has to give to them equally. But one finger can become superior to another by developing a skill with that finger through intense work that the other fingers do not have. It would be silly for the other fingers to assert their equality with the advanced one, but their equality as an extension of the man is unquestioned. The same holds true with all mankind. The efforts, ambitions, willingness to work, and other characteristics of one man makes him superior to the one who lacks these characteristics. As units of mankind, the genius and the ditch digger are vastly unequal, but as extensions of God they are equal, for each has all that God has to give. Just as there is no equality in any two units of nature, there can be no equality in mankind, because there is no equality in the endeavor which causes inferiority and superiority of the units of man. Civilization is hard to build, but easy to tear down. The bloodstream of an intellectual is hard to build into the pattern of an intellectual, but easy to dilute. The bloodstream of a genius or a man of superior mental or physical powers is always the result of long, continued, balanced mating. Likewise, the purity of a racial bloodstream is the result of centuries of balanced mating. Sex interchange should not be lightly practiced. On the contrary, it is the most vitally important function of the unfolding being, for one progresses or retards his physical body and his spiritual awareness through his sex wisdom. Sex is not for the procreation of species alone. It is also for the procreation of ideal and for the exaltation of the spirit. Misinformed people say that humans are lower than the animals in their sex relations, for animals make use of sex to reproduce their species only, while humans are claimed to have sex relations just for pleasure, without any intention of breeding. Sex creates ideal as well as body. The answer to that fallacy is that animals have not yet learned to think sufficiently to create ideal. Animals are only concerned with the creation of bodies periodically. But humans think, and thinkers create ideas continually. Sex is procreative of ideal as well as of bodies. Balanced sex kindles the ecstatic fires of genius and inspires enduring works in man, but not in the cow or sheep. Man is what many generations of sex practice have made him, for we are our ancestors as well as ourselves through long sex practice. Likewise, what we are, our descendants will be. That is everyone's responsibility to posterity, of which every man and woman is father-mother. Thought is electric. Electricity is divided into positive, negative waves. All thought emanations of man have the rhythmic oscillations of polarized pulsing waves. All electric pulsations are piston strokes between the two sex conditions which polarize every wave. The universe is rhythmic. No, the universe is rhythmic. All rhythm is the result of measured repetition. Repetition is impossible except through waves. Rhythm is, therefore, the product of sex. A musical composition is but a rhythmic interpretation of one phase of the sexed electric pulse beat of nature. So is a temple or a steam engine. In order for a musician to compose, which means interpret nature and himself, he must himself be normally sex-balanced by sex-voidance in order that he can recreate and reinterpret those rhythms of nature acting through him as a live sounding board. Sex balance is beneficial for creative thinkers, for through sex voidance by interchange of sex, the mind is enabled to be freed from the demands of the body. But woe to the creative genius who thinks that he can withstand the tearing down process of mismatings, or be sufficient unto himself, or that he can sublimate sex. It is extremely unfortunate for the progress of mankind that this fact is so little understood. For if it were better understood, he who strives for heaven would not take on little bits of hell to serve as stepping stones to heaven. He who dares do that retards his ascent to the exact extent to which he defiles his body, mind, and spirit with inharmonious sex thoughts and actions. Sex interchanges a fundamental principle of nature. It is not only necessary for procreation of species, but for procreation of ideal, because it dynamizes, stabilizes, and balances all physical and mental functions, while sex abstinence devitalizes, distorts, and negates them. Sexlessness. One who foregoes sex can hardly expect to have a creative mind or become a great leader, inventor, composer, or artist in the creative sense. Sexless people tend to become copyists or imitators. They do not create, they repeat. They do not imagine, they remember. Technical skill may develop in them to a high degree to disguise their lack of inspiration, but there is very little art in those skills. Their mental status is progressive only through reflection from other sources outside of themselves. It does not arise from a wellspring within themselves. Sexless lives add very little new knowledge and new creation. For this reason, celibacy and impotency are prone to develop reformers, fanatics, and zealots. Celibacy and virginity are unnatural, abnormal states, which create abnormal and subnormal people. In time, either atrophy of the generative powers or neurotic conditions arising from the continual fight of repression or sublimation causing a permanent derangement of the body and mind. What is sex repression? Electrically, it is the continuity of an unbalanced condition. It is as though one were continually suspended upon a seesaw, making it impossible to pass and repass its equilibrium for the purpose of sequentially voiding one's unbalanced condition, followed by a repetition of it. That refusal To pass and repass one's equilibrium means taking the rhythm out of the cosmic seesaw, which everything in nature is forever playing. Take rhythm from man, and its creative powers are likewise removed, for rhythm is the very foundation of all the arts. Sex repression takes the rhythm out of creative life expression by keeping the unbalanced condition forever suspended. We repeat from a former chapter, everything in nature is forever seeking three things: balance, motion, and rest. Deprive anyone of either of these three normal requisites, and abnormality results from it to the extent that the normal fulfillment of life's purposes becomes impossible. Sex balance is absolutely necessary if one hopes to become a dynamic, forceful being. To become a dynamic, forceful being, one must be able to find absolute stillness as a fulcrum from which to express one's dynamism. All expressions of force arise from stillness or rest. Stillness is necessary for inspiration, and that stillness of universal rest is impossible without sufficient rhythmic balance of body to enable one to forget one's body. Sexless lives beget static mentalities. Without sex, one eventually becomes a negative reversal of all that is dynamic, and the expressions of such a person become the escape channel for an intolerant or iconoclast. If the rhythmic electric oscillations of repeated sex conditioning, voiding of that conditioning, and recharging into that conditioning are rendered impossible, a partial or complete atrophying of the body cells is inevitable. The fight of the atrophying cells in the bloodstream, spinal cord, and brain goes on in all sexless lives, evidencing itself in such ways as sex repression, self-abuse, emotional instability, and other physical defects, until the atrophying process reduces the potential of cell polarity into impotency, and people cease to become electrical, generative human dynamos. Very often, sex repression and sex neglect will reverse one's polarity and result in homosexuality. If youth can be instructed regarding the electrical nature of sex and its effects upon individual lives and progress, it would be a greater deterrent from promiscuity than merely moral or physical grounds. If young men and women are made aware that all the medical care in the world will not prevent their character deterioration if they disobey natural law, they will give more serious thought to man's greatest and natural safeguard, marriage with a balancing mate. Higher beings through balanced sex. This is a phase of knowledge which we are just beginning to comprehend and act upon in our building of higher intellectualism. It should be more fundamental in our educational system. Sex should not be judged as a moral issue, but as a biological and spiritual issue. It would be just as reasonable to judge explosions in chemical elements as immoral. Rather, should we judge sex from the point of view of natural law and obey its demands in relation to mate choosing. The reason why practically everyone pays the high price of sex abuse is because sex is so little understood. Because of that ignorance, there is a rapid moral decadence in culture at this very moment. As sex is the most important thing in shaping man's life, individually and collectively, sex science should be the most important fundamental of his education, and dealt with as frankly as history or mathematics. It is unfortunate for the progress of the human race, physically and culturally, that this is not so, for the renaissance from this downhill plunging of the races of man is a long way off and slow in its coming. Individual unbalance is the forerunner of universal unbalance. Unbalance is usually created by sex unbalance, therefore too much importance cannot be placed on sexual education in youth. The creative urge is in truth the sex urge, and can either become the greatest force for good or the greatest deterrent in life. Our youth should know the importance of balanced mating. A marriage which is based purely upon physical attraction is not a balanced mating. There must be a spiritual, mental, and physical harmony if the essential electrical balance is to be obtained. And that is the end of that part. And I want to interject some thoughts here about homosexuality. I think it is a reversal of polarity, but I'm not saying that a reversal of polarity is something that we should judge of another, and that it is a common thing. The homosexual condition was talked about by Jesus, and he explained it rather well, because in his day, the people that were homosexual were called eunuchs. I hope I'm saying that right. Eunuchs. Well, one day some of the people asked Jesus, what about these eunuchs? They wanted to understand it. And he told them there are 3 kinds of eunuchs. The first kind is those who are born that way from the mother's womb. And the second kind is those who are made that way by castration. They're made that way by other men who do that to them. And the third one is the person who gives up sex for the belief that he can serve his God better that way. So there's 3 kinds. And so I was thinking, well, what do the Christian apologists say about this? Because they seldom ever talk about eunuchs or compare them to homosexuals of today. But I think there is a great resemblance between the two myself. And it's true that some are born that way. And it can't be bad if that's the way you're born, unless you want to see it that, you inherited it from wrong sex mating of your parents or something. But nevertheless, it is out there, and there's more and more people becoming homosexuals today than ever before, I think. And I think there's a need for less testosterone-driven men because, they're more inclined to war, and we're trying to bring peace to this world. And I really appreciate and love the homosexual, and I understand that Christian apologists, when they talk about the second one, those who are made that way by men, those who are castrated, well, they say, oh, well, this was for the purpose of them being, what did they call it? Caretakers of the harems. Chambermaids, that's what they called it. Oh, they were just the chambermaids. Like as if a person can just be made into a slave and then they have no rights. But then the Bible does not say too much good about slavery. And they kind of, there's much in the Bible that says in a certain way that it's all right to have slaves and even to beat them, even if they die from the beating. So I wouldn't use the Bibles as a standard of how to think about slavery. But there are people who think in that way too, that, well, if you're just a chambermaid, that's what you are destined to be, because you will be similar to the homosexual today who has no rights. Like a slave, you can't marry. You can't hope to be thought of as just as good as those that are male-female. But all this reading I'm doing shows that the balance is more than just a physical thing. It's electric. It's like you're 2 incompatible electric currents coming together. So much more than is it the right male and female, is it the right electrical balance between the 2 mates, whatever their sex be. And I just think that it's not a good way to explain what Jesus said about the homosexual in his day, to just say, as a Christian apologist, that, well, they were the chambermaids. like that was just something that is not something to be questioned. It is to be questioned. We should treat other people like we would want to be treated ourselves. And personally, I'm all for the gays being given the right to marry, because when they're in a marriage relationship, then they're not so much into promiscuity, which is not as good for them as a committed relationship, and they feel that need to be committed to their partner. I think it's a good thing, and I hope it spreads to all the states that gay marriage is allowed. But it seems that some Christian people, not all Christians for sure, a lot of Christians have a good attitude about this, but some of the more fanatical ones want to say, oh, God is so offended about this, about gay lifestyle and gay marriages and stuff. But I think they themselves haven't really looked into what all they should look into about sex as explained in these things I've been reading. Because they tend to vilify and demonize people. And that isn't good. And I can understand exactly why the gays don't like being described that way, like they're deviant or like they're molesters or something. And I think the Christians who properly understand marriage wouldn't say that we should mix church and state, because marriage is a legal thing, not something that is determined by someone's religious viewpoints concerning it. It's a legal status. And I just hope that people's attitudes about the gay community will change, because they certainly need to do more inward looking at their own selves for having such a bad attitude concerning the gays. And that's my 2 cents worth on it. I had to say that because after reading this and realizing that there's all kinds of reasons why there's reversal of polarity, you have to make a judgment of, are the reasons moral or immoral? But really, the truth is, you can't judge that, because it is a scientific understanding. Just like you can't judge the explosion of chemicals that are mixed together that blow up. You don't judge that, you just understand its cause. So, there's a lot of thinking people need to do about this, and any comments on this from you, I would welcome. And this is the Dove Lady. I will begin the next chapter of the book I'm actually reading. It's this one, The Secret Science by John Baines. And I'm not going to get off track again. The next chapter is called God. It's chapter 7. And here comes that train. Can't talk now too good anyways. The train comes every 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, this is the Dove Lady. Over and out for now.